So, your teacher, Mrs. Hall, and I were talking about storytelling and about the upcoming NaNoWriMo thing. And I thought I'd share with you, as I think you know, I write a lot of books, right? And I write one every other month. I have to write a 250-page book. And I've figured out a way, for me, it works for me, it might not work for you, but I hope it does, an easy way to help me to write these stories. And I'm going to share that with you. And maybe it'll help you in NaNoWriMo, and it'll help you through other things you do with writing. Okay? And the thing that I learned that's hard about writing is it's really hard to make the story jump out of the page and really feel like the reader is really there. That's really difficult to do, and it takes a lot of practice. And the thing that I've learned that helps me to do that is, how I guess not there. What I've learned on how I do that to make the story really pop out of the page is through how I manipulate the reader's emotions. And so, is the animation working? Yeah? Okay. So, what you need to realize, first of all, look at the guy that's mad down here. He's kind of funny looking. But what you need to realize is when you're writing a story, you're not really a writer. What you are is a person that manipulates the reader's emotions. You're trying to trick the reader into feeling happy or feeling sad or angry or scared or a lot of these different emotions. And if you can trick the reader into feeling these emotions, then you can take them on a really cool adventure. And the thing that I learned that helps me to control these emotions and also helps me with writing my stories is how I do the plot design. Now, when I first started learning how to write, plot design seemed really frightening. It seemed really complex. I felt like I was in a math class back in college again. And it seemed really, really scary. And I was really intimidated by this when I first started to write. But then I learned that I kind of learned sort of a formula-like thing to it. That I can sort of figure out how different scenes in the book have different purposes. And so I learned this from, I didn't make this up, I learned it from another author. And I call this the 7-scene outline method. Now, some authors don't like this. Some authors don't like to outline. They just want to write, and the story goes wherever it goes. And I used to be like that, and I found it didn't work very well for me. So I figured out this 7-scene outline thing, and I kind of put it into a formula so that I can follow it whenever I design a new story. And here's the 7 scenes that I create. So when I start a book, and I'm starting a new book, I started it last week, the first thing I do is I figure out what these 7 scenes are, and each of these scenes are going to be a chapter. And typically, my books have about 35 chapters in them. And so I figure out these 7 chapters, and then I figure out what has to go in between so I can go from one scene to the next scene and have it make sense. And so the first one I write is the hook, and I'll explain what all of these mean. And then there's the first plot point and the first pinch point and the dark night of the soul and the recommitment and the second pinch point, second plot point, and the resolution. And there's a second dark night of the soul at the end there as well. And so I follow this pattern on every book that I write, and I find that it makes it so much easier to get the plot started. And I'll give you an example if we have time at the end of a story outline that I worked on. Okay? So, figure out, learn what each of these scenes, what their purpose is, and then you'll find that putting these together into a story makes it a lot easier. So, the first thing is the hook. The hook is the first chapter that you got to create some kind of interesting situation that the reader is going to read, and they're going to go, wow, that's really interesting. I want to see what happens next. And they keep reading. Because a lot of readers give up on your book in the first 5 or 10 pages because you didn't create an interesting situation right away. And you're probably thinking, well, okay, that's great. You can say, write something interesting, but how do I do that? Telling me to do it isn't necessarily as easy. It's hard. And so here's some examples of the ways that you do it. And Harry Potter is famous for the first one, reveal a mystery. You say, hey, there's this Philosopher's Stone thing. Or for Harry, the hook was, here's this kid who lives under the stairs. Now that's really interesting. What is going on there? Or one that's common in books that are called thrillers or spy books or military books. You give a character something and then you take it away from them. So you show a character that gets something they've always wanted, and then as soon as they're really happy, you take that thing away. Or you threaten the character's family. That happens a lot with game night in my books. Or you threaten the community or threaten the whole universe. That happens in my books too. I have something happen where Herobrine is going to do something terrible to Minecraft. And I put that at the beginning. And writing prompts are frequently, you can find writing prompts online, and many of these are just the first sentence to a hook. And so you can find lots of those as examples. But when you do this and you create the hook, it's really important that you don't show the reader everything. Like on the Harry Potter, the first Harry Potter story. He was trying to find the Philosopher's Stone, right? And he thought that the Philosopher's Stone would just give you lots and lots of power. He didn't know that Voldemort was trying to use it to come back from the dead. Right? You didn't learn what the real mystery was until the end of the story. You learned little bitty pieces, and you thought there was a bad guy. Snape was a bad guy, and you thought there was something bad going on with him when there wasn't. And then at the end, you learn the real mystery. So you always show the reader a little bit of what you want them to see, but not everything. So you can keep them interested and keep them on the hook. So in my favorite movie, the Lego Movie, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Lego Movie? No?
Yeah.
No? Oh, okay. So at the beginning, you see Vitruvius confronting Lord Business in that really cool scene where they were in a lava cave or something. And we learn a couple of things in the hook. We learn that Lord Business is evil. And we learn that he has the super powerful weapon, the Craggle. And we learn from Vitruvius that there's the piece of resistance, and that's going to stop it. And then all of a sudden, Vitruvius gives him this premonition. He has a vision. And he tells him of the special, and he's the greatest, most interesting, most important person of all time, and the special can defeat the Craggle. And it's like, wow, that is really, really interesting. What is going to happen next? So I'm really curious about what's going to happen in the story, and I'm really excited because this sounds like this is going to be a cool adventure. And so this hook kicks off the adventure right away. It gets the reader, or in this case, the person watching the movie, drawn right into the story so that they want to see what happens next. That's a great, great hook. Okay, now the first plot point. This is really important. When you get into junior high school, into middle grade, you'll learn about the Greek tragedies and how the Greeks made stories. And they call it the hero's journey. And one of the steps in the hero's journey is the call to action. And the first plot point is that. The first plot point calls the hero into this adventure. And the hero has to leave his life behind and go on the adventure. And the hero learns a little bit about what the antagonist is doing. We learn a little bit about what Lord Vitruvius is doing, but really not a lot. We don't really know Lord Business. We don't really know what Lord Business's plan is yet at the first plot point, but we see a little bit of it. So we reveal the smallest part of the antagonist's plan, but only the smallest piece. And the protagonist going to learn some more through the story, but he has no choice. He has to go on this adventure. So this is the call to action. And it's always important to remember, you don't reveal too much. You reveal just enough to keep the reader interested. But you always have to add tension in your story. And the way we add tension is through action and dialogue. So we got to keep action moving. We got to keep dialogue going so that we can have tension in the story. Now, and actually I'm struggling with this first plot point in my current book, because I have the protagonist leaving his life behind. It's the call to action. He learns a little bit about the antagonist. We learn a little bit of the story. But the problem in my current book that I'm working on is the hero doesn't have to go. The hero is going to choose to go on this adventure, but you want to make it so he has no choice. He has to leave his life behind. And the reason for that is it adds more tension. Always want to add more tension. So in the Lego Movie, the first plot point is when Emmett is captured by Bad Cop, and Lord Business has ordered him to be melted. And he's about to get melted, and then all of a sudden Wildstyle appears and rescues Emmett, and they go on this awesome chase, and Emmett leaves his life behind, and Emmett has no choice. He has to go on this adventure or be melted. And we learn a little bit that Lord Business doesn't like him, and he wants to melt him, and he wants the piece of resistance, and they ride away and they escape. And it's a really exciting chase, and they just barely get away. But what's important that I didn't mention before, let me go back up. Here, the first three key scenes, the first half of the book, the hero is responding to the bad guy. The bad guy's in control, the bad guy's pushing the good guy around, and the good guy is running from him. In the second half of the story, the good guy's going to be in control, and the good guy is going to attack instead of run away. He's going to attack the bad guy and attack the bad guy's plan. And that's a really important point. And what happens in the middle between response and attack is this dark night of the soul. This scene, scene number 4, super important. And we'll get to that. And I got some cool examples of how that's done. Okay, so here we are in the Lego Movie, the first plot point. Emmett goes on this adventure. We know something's going on, but we don't really know yet what it is. So the reader's kind of wondering what happens next. And the reader's feeling all of these emotions because he already likes Emmett, because the writers did a great job of developing that character, and we feel sorry for him. Now, the first pinch points are like action scenes. In my stories, they're usually a battle. And a pinch point reminds the reader about the antagonist's plan or their needs or the forces that they have. And in the pinch point, it's frequently common we show a little bit about the protagonist's internal flaw, his character arc. You know, in my books, it's usually Game Night 999 is afraid of failing his friends, or he's afraid he doesn't know the right solution to the problem. So I reveal that in the first pinch point. And in this first pinch point, the protagonist, all you need to do is have him survive. He doesn't have to win. He just barely survives this battle or this conflict. And in this pinch point, of course, we put lots of sensory input. What it feels like, what it smells like, what it sounds like. We had lots of danger and we had lots of tension. We always want to crank up the tension. So at the end of a pinch point, you want to leave the reader sweating from all the action. And it's important that the protagonist just barely gets away. He almost loses here. And in the Lego Movie, the first pinch point happens in the Old West, when Emmett and Wildstyle go there, and the bad cop shows up, and the bad cop chases him out of the Old West. And you'll notice, if you look at the number of police that are in the Old West, there's more police in the Old West than there were in Lego Town. And that's because you always want to increase tension. So as we go through the story, there's more and more police and more micromanagers because the writers are increasing the tension. And while we're in the Old West, we learn about Emmett, and Emmett doesn't really think he's a special. He's just an ordinary guy. So we learn about his character arc, and Emmett's character arc is about him being the special and him having confidence. And they barely get away, right? The cops chase them, they run around, they build some kind of contraption pulled by pigs, and they barely get away. And we really increase the tension. We have lots more cops. But the really cool thing about this pinch point and the way they really increase tension is they're falling off the bridge. The train went off the bridge because bad cop blew it up. They're falling through the air. There's no way they can survive. They're going to die for sure. And does anybody remember what saves them?
Yes.
Who is it?
Batman.
Batman, right. That's an awesome scene. You think for sure they're going to die. And then, whoosh, here comes Batman and saves them. And at the end of this scene, your pulse is racing. It's a great, great pinch point, and it really cranks up the tension. Okay, now, the Dark Night of the Soul is the fourth key scene, and this is super important. So this is going to be a scene or a battle or something where you make it look like the bad guy's going to win. It seems for certain that the good guy has no hope at all. So like in the first Star Wars Episode 4, Obi-Wan Kenobi gets killed by Darth Vader. It's like, how can that happen? He's like the main good guy, and he gets killed. Luke Skywalker has no hope. Or in Despicable Me, Despicable Me 2, Gru runs out of money and he can't steal the moon now. And he has to tell all of his minions he's failed and they can no longer be bad guys. And it's a really sad scene. And it looks like he has no hope at all. He's done for. In Finding Nemo, another of my favorite movies. Do you remember Saving Nemo?
Yeah.
So Marlin, the dad, sees Nemo in the dentist's office, and it looks like he's dead in the little plastic bag. And Marlin thinks he's dead, so he turns around and leaves. It's like, how can he find Nemo if Nemo's dead? So these are examples of a dark night of the soul, where it looks like you're tricking the reader into thinking that they've lost. And you're doing this on purpose to manipulate their emotions. You're going to hit them with something sad, and then you're going to follow with something super awesome, so that the awesome thing seems even better because they were just so sad at the thing before. So in the Lego movie, the Dark Night of the Soul there is when the bad cops destroy Cloud Cuckoo Land, and all the master builders are captured. And it looks like they're going to escape, and Emmett and his friends escape in a sub, but then it explodes. And it seems like they're lost. It explodes underwater. There is no way they can survive. This must be the end of the movie. Boy, this is a rotten ending to a movie. And the reader thinks Emmett's done for. And so, but what comes next makes him really happy. But the emotions we're trying to drive is to make him sad. In the Dark Night of the Soul here, if I can get the reader to squeeze out a tear, I feel pretty happy. Because I want them to cry here if I can make it happen. That's the mark of a good Dark Night of the Soul. And then after that, always, 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 after the Dark Night of the Soul comes the recommitment. And this is the most important part of your story. During the Dark Night of the Soul, your hero learns something that helps his character become stronger. He learns something from his character arc. And now, after he's learned this thing, he's really committed to finishing this adventure. But he's really mad now. He's tired of being pushed around by the bad guy. And it's time for him to take control. And it's time for him to attack. And that's what happens in the recommitment. The good guy gets really angry. Now, a great one was in Star Wars Episode 7. where you have Kylo Ren and Finn fighting, and Finn has Luke Skywalker's lightsaber, and they're fighting with their lightsabers out in the pretty little snowy forest. And what happens to Finn? Does anybody remember? Yeah, he gets stabbed and he loses and he falls down. And he drops the lightsaber, which is what Kylo Ren wants. And does he get the lightsaber?
No.
No, because Rey comes along and Rey uses the Force and takes it. And now Rey is mad. And she isn't going to take anything from him anymore. It's time for her to bring the fight to Kylo Ren. And they have a fight, and she's in control now. And she defeats him, and she's in charge. And you really, really are happy for her. You're sad for Finn. Oh my gosh, Finn, he was the main character, and he just got killed or something. And then she comes along, and you're totally cheering for her, and it's awesome. And so that's a good dark night of the soul and recommitment. You make them sad, then you make them happy. And then from this point on, after the recommitment, the hero is attacking. Attack. Okay, now we're going to get to the second pinch point. The fifth scene. And now the hero's attacking. And we learn more about the internal struggle of the characters. The stakes are getting higher. It's getting more dangerous for everyone. And it's getting harder and harder for the good guy to win. But because of the recommitment, the hero refuses to give up. He keeps attacking. He keeps pushing. He refuses to surrender. And so we're cranking up the tension even more. We're using lots of action and lots of dialogue to drive the story forward. But we're increasing the tension because the hero, he isn't going to give up anymore. It's time for him to be in charge. In the Lego movie, the second pinch point happens when Emmett has broken into Lord Business's tower and they're going to go try to put the piece of resistance on the Kraggle. And we see this really cool scene where we learn about Wildstyle, and her name is really Lucy. And suspense is really high, and he's trying to get to the Kraggle and get past the shields, and it's really exciting. And so this is a scene of really high action, really high suspense. And we get the reader's pulse really racing here when they get in there and try to solve this problem. So we want lots of action here. Now the second plot point, this is where the hero is going to learn the rest of the villain's plan. And we're going to reveal the whole plan to the good guy and to the reader. And usually we give the hero the last bit of information he needs so that he can defeat the bad guy. And the hero realizes he can do it. Like in my books, Game Knight realizes he has to face his fears, or he has to trust his friends, or he has to work together, or something like that. He's learned the lesson through the story, and now he's ready to really attack. And from the second plot point on, it seems like constant high-speed action. You don't want any long descriptions after the second plot point, because descriptions slow down the tension. You don't want to offer up any new characters, because readers won't care about these new characters after the second plot point. Even if you introduce a character and you want to kill him off to try to squeeze a couple of tears out of the reader, it won't work. Because after the second plot point, the reader doesn't care about new characters. I've done this before where I've put new characters in here only because I wanted them in the next series. And so I'd stick them here, but the readers don't care about them. They don't care if they live or die. They don't care about anything about them. So here, the second plot point, you learn about the villain's plan. The hero learns from his character arc, and he's going to face his fears and all that kind of stuff. And we're going to have lots of action and dialogue. So this is when we really hit the accelerator on the story, and we want to move fast, and we want the reader to get really excited about what happens next. And so here, the second plot point is when Emmett is captured and Vitruvius has been killed, and so Ghost Vitruvius, which I think was the funniest part of the scene, hanging from a string there, he learns the last piece of information he needs to be able to stop Lord Business. And he learns that the prophecy was fake, but anybody has the ability to be a special. And he has to stand up and save his friends, because if he doesn't do it, nobody's going to do it. Emmett has no choice. He has to do it. And so he gets all fired up and he jumps into the abyss to try to get the piece of resistance so he can save everybody. So the hero learns about his character arc, he learns about himself, and he goes and he attacks the problem here. And then it's really exciting when we're in the physical world. But near the ending, we have a second dark night of the soul. So we have a second time when it looks like the good guy's going to fail. And that happens when the dad starts destroying all of the creatures that the people in Legoland have built. And he starts destroying everything, and it looks like the micromanagers are going to win the battle, and it looks like Lord Business is going to win the battle. And it seems like it's impossible to solve this problem. But the boy sends Emmett back into the world, and Emmett is really mad, and Emmett is going to take care of this. So we always have something here that's scary or sad, and we're always going to follow it by something excited or happy. And so when Emmett goes back into the world, he's now a builder. He believes in himself. He's building stuff. He's attacking the problem. He's going to attack Lord Business's tower. And here, the main character, you must learn from the lesson that's hidden through the story. He has to learn the last thing from his character arc so that he can do whatever your story's about. Overcome his fear, believe in himself, accept criticism, appreciate his friends, stand up to bullies, not try to be somebody just to be accepted. Whatever your story's about, the character arc gets resolved here. And then in the final battle, the good guy wins. And in Lego Movie, the final battle comes when Emmett faces Lord Business, and he tells him, which is part of the story about the character arc of the story. He tells him that even Lord Business can be special, right? And Lord Business says, "Wow, okay, that's great. I guess you're right." And Emmett wins. And everything is resolved, and the character arc is resolved, and the story is resolved, and everyone is happy. So these are the 7 scenes. And when I go through and write a story, I'll go through and I'll first figure these out. I usually figure out the last final battle. What do I want that to look like? You know, is it going to be about an Ender Dragon and he's fighting the Ender Dragon? What's that battle going to be like? And then I'll think about the Dark Night of the Soul, the one at the ending and the one in the middle. And how's he going to look like he fails? Because we want to trick the reader into thinking he fails. I'll usually figure out those first, then I'll figure out what's a cool hook. Because the hook isn't really related to the storyline at all. It's just a cool thing that can start it going. And that's how I do it. I outline each scene individually. I just write a single sentence for each one. And then I go back and I write 2 or 3 more sentences for each one. And I slowly fill in what these scenes are going to look like. And then this helps me a lot to create the scene, to create the story. And once I've figured out these 7 scenes, then I can go in and fill in what has to happen in between so the story makes sense. And this takes practice, but you can totally do it. So thank you. Are there any questions?
Questions for Mark. That was a lot of information. I saw you writing a lot down. Do you have questions? Okay, come up.
And you're going to get notes on this, right?
What's that?
They're going to get notes on this.
Yes, we have a lot more. And they took some notes themselves.
And I can still go through the example that I made.
Okay. Calvin, go ahead. Do you guys have any other questions on it?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Jill.
Where did you learn all the stuff that like all this stuff like on how to write? Like where did you learn all the booky stuff?
So when I first started to write, you learned the last time I spoke to you. I wrote my first book, and it was a big giant failure, right?
Mhm.
It was a big giant failure because I didn't know any of this stuff. And so I went to the bookstore and I went and found books on writing. And there's one of them that I really liked that was called Spilling Ink, that was actually written for kids. And yet you have that. Yep, that's a great book to read. I actually read a lot of books and I found that they were really confusing and I didn't understand a lot of it. But then I found another book. The book that taught me about these 7 scenes was from a book called Story Engineering. And that book really helped me to understand it. That's not an easy book to read. I think you should stick with the Spilling Ink book. But I also go to conferences a lot. I take classes a lot. I just came back from a class in Tennessee, a 3-day-long class that taught me a bunch of new things that I've learned, especially around dialogue. And I was making a presentation for you guys about dialogue to share what I learned there, too. So that's how I did it, is I read lots of books and I take lots of classes whenever I can.
Okay.
All right, I'm ready.
How do you come up with the characters' names?
So what I used to do, let's see if I can find it. I used to do this. There's a site that will translate a word into lots of different languages. So let's say I want a character's name to mean hatred. I'm gonna select all the languages and then I'm gonna submit. And this will take hatred and convert it into every language on the list here. And sometimes you end up with a cool looking word that you want to use. Is it there yet? Not yet. This takes a while. You'll come up with a cool looking word there that you might want to use as a name. Also, I look at mythological monsters. I'll look up monsters from myths. Here's one. This is the one that gave me the name Erebus. This is Cerberus. So I can look up different mythological creatures from Greek history or other histories. Or I will do literary monsters. So these are monsters from books. Grendel is a very famous creature from books. Here's a basilisk that you thought was from Harry Potter, but really that's a type of literary monster kind of thing. Let's see, did this finish? Yeah, so here's all these. Hatred has been changed into different words. This might be neat. Hass, because it sounds like the sound of a snake. That might be kind of cool. Or Goratoa, I don't know. So this is one way I do it, is I'll put a name into here and I'll look at it translated and see if there's a cool looking word there that I can use. This might be nice because it has a Y in it. If we get rid of the B, Nasai, or we put a K there, Nake maybe, or Chuki, that might be cool. So this is how I come up with the names, is I'll use a translator, or I'll go and look up literary monsters or historical monsters, historical characters, and I'll look them up that way. That's what I do.
And we did watch your video on how to name the characters too. That was helpful.
Oh,
with
good,
the hard
good.
sound.
Yep.
Yep. All right. Anybody else have a question on the writing? The 7 steps. Okay. Do you think that makes it seem easier?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good.
Do you want me to go through my example?
Yes, let's do that. Yep, they would like to see that.
Okay. So I was thinking about a story because you guys are thinking about a story. And I probably won't have time to write this during the month of November, but I would love to because I'm excited about this story. But I thought about a world where there were giants. Giants and plainsmen and tree folk and merfolk and shadow creatures and a whole fantasy world. So my hook is the shadow creatures go and destroy the village of the giants. And the villain, Karkazar, does that follow the rules of character naming that I made?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 hard K's and a Z. You know he's bad, right? So Karkazar tells the Shadow General he wants to destroy all the giants. And he wants to return the world back to the way it used to be. But first he has to find a magical artifact to help him with his plan. Now, one of the things I learned at this last workshop I went to in Tennessee was your bad guy. I made my bad guy all wrong when I wrote my first 18 books. That I did it wrong. Because your bad guy, now listen carefully, the bad guy has to think that he's a good guy in his own head. Lord Business, he thinks he's helping Legoland because he's going to bring order and he's going to keep everything the way it's supposed to be. Lord Business thinks he's doing a good thing. Darth Vader thinks he's bringing order to the galaxy. Darth Vader thinks he's doing a good thing. The villain has to feel like a good guy in his own brain. And I didn't do that with Herobrine in all my books. And now I do when I write new books. So here, I have to come up with a way for Karkazar. He wants to put the world back to the way it used to be because maybe the giants were mean to the wizards in the past or something. I don't know. But there has to be a reason why he wants to do this. He can't just be totally evil and that's all. So I'm going to start this story from the point of view of the bad guy. The bad guy is the point of view character. He tells us a little bit of his plan, but not very much. And I want the reader to feel bad for the good guys, they want to feel bad for the giants and feel sympathy for the giants. And I want the readers to hate Karkazar. Then my first plot point. Gideon, the hero, he's walking around with his brother. Gideon's a giant. And he falls into a cavern and there's no way for him to get out. And Gideon tells his brother to bring help. But as Gideon is in this big cavern, he realizes it's a big ancient village. And he finds something on the ground that was dropped by his friend, who's an old wizard. And he realizes the wizard has been captured and he's been dragged off. And so he has to go help the wizard before something terrible happens to him. So this is the call to adventure. That Gideon has to go help the wizard, his friend, the old wizard, before the wizard gets killed or something. Now here's my problem with this story. Does Gideon have to go help the wizard? He could choose no, right? That makes this a bad first plot point. He should have no choice. He should somehow be forced to go helping him. And I haven't figured that out yet. But Gideon Rockfist, he's a giant and he's the hero. He's smaller than the other giant, so he has self-esteem issues. So here's my character arc. My character arc is going to be about self-esteem. And he's the only giant that cares about this old wizard. Okay, pinch point. Gideon gets confronted by a bunch of shadow warriors. And they can see this giant has no hammer. That's what giants use in this world. They only use hammers to fight with, big war hammers. Because giants are all about strength and what looks really cool. And so they think Gideon is defenseless, but Gideon found a sword while he was exploring this ancient village. And the Shadow Warriors assume that Gideon's going to be slow and clumsy like all the warriors, but because Gideon is small, he's fast and quick. And because he doesn't always do what he's supposed to, he uses the sword to battle the Shadow Warriors instead of just giving up. Now, another problem with this, first pinch point, we're pretty far into the book. It's important your character is not alone. They have to have somebody to talk to because dialogue drives the action. So I have to give Gideon a companion, and so he's going to meet a guy named Ironjaw down there. He has to have a companion so that we can have dialogue. Sometimes, like in one of my books, I give Game Night a pet. I gave him a pet penguin in one book, Tux, so that Game Night would have somebody to talk to because you have to have dialogue. And so I gave him a pet just for that purpose, so they can have dialogue. And the penguin looked really cool on the cover, too. So there's that. Okay. And Ironjaw, his friend, he has a character arc, too. Ironjaw feels like a coward, that he ran away from a battle instead of fighting. And so part of Ironjaw's character arc is going to be about finding his bravery through this story. Now, the Dark Night of the Soul. Gideon and Ironjaw, they rescue the wizard, and they're trying to escape, but they get caught on a bridge that covers the Chasm of Sorrow. And this is a bottomless pit. If you fall into this hole, you fall forever. You never stop falling. You never survive. And so they're on this bridge, and we get Shadow Warriors on both sides of the bridge. And so they can't get across because they're trapped. And so Gideon is going to look at the walls and sees that there's a cave cut into the wall of next to the bridge. And he's going to cut the ropes on the bridge, and the bridge will swing down, and they'll fall into the hole there, and they'll be safe. But while they're on the bridge, surrounded by Shadow Warriors, it looks like they're defeated, and there's no way they can survive. So that's what I want to do. I want to make the reader sad here because it looks like Gideon and Ironjaw and the wizard are doomed. But then they swing down and they land into this hole, which is a tunnel that leads into the Shadow Realm. Not a place you want to go. But Gideon will figure out, and he'll make some contraption, something that giants never do, out of wood. Giants never build with wood. They only build with stone and metal. And he'll make some kind of contraption that will get them torches that will drive the Shadow Warriors back, and they'll make it back to the village, the underground village. So he's going to do something. He's going to do something from his character arc, which is do something that's not giantish, but do something that's Gideonish. And he's going to build something, and he's going to create something, and it's going to help him to escape the Shadow Realm and get back to the giant village. So that's his recommitment. He does this, and he realizes, I don't have to be just like a giant. I can be like me. And we're going to get out of this, and we're going to save the wizard because I'm determined to do it because no Shadow Warriors are going to stop me. And they get back into the underground village I call First Stone. And now Gideon's brother has showed up with all the giants from home. But when they get into this underground village, they're all attacked by Shadow Warriors, and they're surrounded and they're outnumbered. And a bunch of giants are going to get hurt or killed. And so Gideon goes running around like a crazy guy with his sword, and all the other giants are shocked to see him using a sword instead of a warhammer, but they're happy that he saved them. So they barely survive the pinch point, but instead of running away, Gideon tells them, we're going to keep going because we got to get that magic amulet from the bad guy so that he won't destroy everything. So the second plot point, we give the character the last bit of information he needs. And what he learns from Ironjaw is Karkazar is looking for this amulet of power. And if he has the amulet of power, he can blacken out the sun and cover the land with darkness, allowing the shadow warriors to go anywhere they want and attack anything they want. So instead of running away from this underground village, Gideon convinces all the giants to go deep into the shadow realm where the amulet of power is kept. And they have to take it before Karkazar can get it. So now we know the bad guy's whole plan. And Gideon is showing some leadership, and he's showing that even though he's a small giant, he's not afraid. And he's convincing the bigger giants to follow him. And if they don't follow him, he's going on his own. So now if the giants don't follow him, they look like cowards. So they have to follow him. And then in the final battle, again, we always have a second dark night of the soul. In the final battle, the giants are battling the shadow warriors. And they're outnumbered, but they're going to use Gideon's contraption that he built out of wood. And the giants hate they built it out of wood, because giants don't build wood. They build stone and metal, because it's strong and heavy. And they're able to fight back against the shadow warriors. And Gideon takes the amulet of power, and he runs back into the tunnel where they were first entered the shadow realm. And he fights Karkazar, but Karkazar beats him and knocks Gideon to the ground, and Gideon drops his sword. And Karkazar is about to destroy him. He's lost. Oh no! Ah! So we make the reader think that Gideon is defeated and he's about to be killed. And then all of a sudden, Ironjaw comes running out. So here's the second recommitment. Ironjaw comes out of the darkness, and he knocks Karkazar down, and he's wielding the biggest warhammer we've ever seen. And he battles Karkazar, and Karkazar goes flying off into the chasm of sorrow. And so Ironjaw has faced his fear, and he refused to be a coward, and he fought back. And at the last minute, Gideon catches Ironjaw's wrist, and he saves him from falling into the chasm of sorrow. And so we see Gideon using his strength and believing in himself, and we see Ironjaw confronting his fears and refusing to be a coward. And then they win. Yay! And then they go back home, and everything goes back to normal. But now Ironjaw, who everybody thought was a coward, is now a hero, and he's living with the other giants. And everybody who thought Gideon was just a puny giant, instead, he's one of the famous giants now, and everybody treats him like he's big and tall. And so now Gideon is treated like an equal. So that's my story. Those are my 7 scenes that I laid out. Now I want you to think about, here's my, my hook is with Karkazar, the shadow destroying the giant village. And then the first plot point is Gideon walking along with his brother, and he falls into a cavern. So you need some scenes between this hook with Karkazar and this scene with Gideon falling into the ground. So I might have a scene of the giant village so I can show the reader what that looks like, and show Gideon being treated poorly by the other giants. And then I might have another scene with Karkazar attacking another giant village. And then another scene with Gideon. He's so mad he storms out of the village, and his brother chases after him because Gideon is so upset. And then Gideon falls into the hole and falls into the cavern. So you need to create a sequence of events so that these things make sense when you tie them together. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now this isn't easy. And you're probably thinking, this seems really hard, and it is. But when you start doing it, the more times you do it, the easier it gets. And so it's just something you have to practice at.
All right.
Thank you so much, Mark.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions or anything?
Anything else? How many of you are excited to get started?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Good. I'm sure we'll have lots of questions as we get going.
Okay. Cool.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.